Hey, we're here to read chapter 14 of Things Fall Apart. Make sure you're following along in your book or on the PDF. Okonkwo was well received by his mother's kinsmen in Mbanta. The old man who received him was his mother's younger brother, who is now the eldest surviving member of that family. So recall that Okonkwo has been exiled for 7 years to his motherland, which is the tribe that his mom came from originally before she died. And he's staying with his uncle, who is still alive. His name was Ukendu, and it was he who had received Okonkwo's mother 20 and 10 years before, when she had been brought home from Umuofia to be buried with her people. So it sounds like his mom died like 30 years ago. Okonkwo was only a boy then, and Ukendu still remembered him crying the traditional farewell. "Mother, mother, mother is going." Sad. That was many years ago. Today, Okonkwo was not bringing his mother home to be buried with her people. He was taking his family of 3 wives and their children to seek refuge in his motherland. As soon as Ukendu saw him with his sad and weary company, he guessed what had happened and asked no questions. It was not until the following day that Okonkwo told him the full story. The old man listened silently to the end and then said with some relief, "It is a female Oku," and he arranged the requisite rites and sacrifices. Okonkwo was given a plot of land on which to build his compound and 2 or 3 pieces of land on which to farm during the coming planting season. Now this, of course, is an ironic detail because we remember that Okonkwo, he came from nothing growing up as a boy. His dad had nothing. His dad was lazy, improvident. And so Okonkwo had to earn everything himself to gain his status. And here, it's like he's hit rock bottom. He accidentally killed this kid in his tribe in Umuofia. He has been exiled to his motherland, which is ironic in itself because we know how he feels about women. And now he's depending on these strangers who owe him nothing to give him things. With the help of his mother's kinsmen, he built himself an obi, which is like his compound, and 3 huts for his wives. He then installed his personal god and the symbols of his departed fathers. Each of Ukendu's 5 sons contributed 300 cediums to enable their cousin to plant a farm, for as soon as the first rain came, farming would begin. At last, the rain came. Now I'm slowing down because we have been talking about both rain and fire as important symbols throughout this entire book. And we've talked about Okonkwo really being associated with fire and dryness. So I want you to pay attention to the description and the imagery in this section when it comes to rain and think about what it might mean, what it might be supposed to symbolize here. At last the rain came. It was sudden and tremendous. For 2 or 3 moons, the sun, which we associate with fire, had been gathering strength until it seemed to breathe a breath of fire on the earth. All the grass had long been scorched brown, and the sands felt like live coals to the feet. Evergreen trees wore a dusty coat of brown. The birds were silenced in the forests, and the world lay panting under the live, vibrating heat. So this might symbolize Okonkwo and his rising anger throughout the story. And what it does to life, like his son Nwoye, it just covers it in darkness and death. And then came the clap of thunder. It was an angry, metallic, and thirsty clap, unlike the deep and liquid rumbling of the rainy season. That clap, to me, like the description of that beginning of this rainstorm, sounds kind of like what happened when Okonkwo accidentally shot Ukwendu, I think his name was, the kid that he accidentally killed. And so it might kind of symbolize that event of him accidentally shooting that kid in his village as kind of a shifting or a change in the plot where things are going to be different now. A mighty wind arose and filled the air with dust. Palm trees swayed as the wind combed their leaves into flying crests like strange and fantastic coif, which is like hair. When the rain finally came, it was in large, solid drops of frozen water, which the people called the nuts of the water heaven. They were hard and painful on the body as they fell, yet young people ran about happily picking up the cold nuts and throwing them into their mouths to melt. So this is kind of like suggesting that this process that Okonkwo is undergoing, this change that he's going to undergo, is going to be painful. It is not going to be easy. And I also want to point out that this sounds similar to the locusts from an earlier chapter. Remember, the locusts are the giant like bugs that they swarm, and it doesn't happen very often, but it was like, it seems like it would be a bad thing, and in some ways it might have been, but they were also a delicacy, and so the Igbo people really looked forward to them, and they would pick them up and they would eat them, kind of like what they're doing with the hail right now. The other thing I want to point out real quick before we move on is we talked about the language of the Igbo people as being very kind of circular and meandering, and they kind of go around their point, but they don't like come out and directly state it. We're seeing that so much in the book. Everything from the epigraph at the beginning that's talking about the falcon and it's like flying around and it's lost and things fall apart, to the folk tale with the tortoise and the birds and like how that story ends. That's basically the story of the book. To the locusts, which symbolize what's happening, to, in this case, the hail, which symbolizes what's happening. So it's like this story appears in so many different forms, and it kind of just like circles around throughout the entire novel. It's really cool how it's written that way. The earth quickly came to life, and the birds in the forest fluttered around and chirped merrily. A vague scent of life and green vegetation was diffused in the air. As the rain began to fall more soberly and in smaller liquid drops, children sought for shelter, and all were happy, refreshed, and thankful. Okonkwo and his family worked very hard to plant a new farm, but it was like beginning life anew without the vigor and enthusiasm of youth, like learning to become left-handed in old age. Work no longer had for him the pleasure it used to have, and when there was no work to do, he sat in a silent half-sleep. His life had been ruled by a great passion, to become one of the lords of the clan. That had been his life spring, and he had all but achieved it. Then everything had been broken. He had been cast out of his clan like a fish onto a dry, sandy beach, panting. Clearly his personal god or chi was not made for great things. A man could not rise beyond the destiny of his chi. The saying of the elders was not true, that if a man said yeah, his chi also affirmed. Here was a man whose chi said nay despite his own affirmation. The old man, Ukendu, saw clearly that Okonkwo had yielded to despair, and he was greatly troubled. He would speak to him after the Isa Ifi ceremony. The youngest of Ukendu's 5 sons, Amikwu, was marrying a new wife. The bride price had been paid, and all but the last ceremony had been performed. Amikwu and his people had taken palm wine to the bride's kinsmen about 2 moons before Okonkwo's arrival in Mubanti, and so it was time for the final ceremony of confession. The daughters of the family were all there, some of them having come a long way from their homes in distant villages. Ukendu's eldest daughter had come from Obodu, nearly half a day's journey away. The daughters of Ukendu's brothers were also there. It was a full gathering of Umuada, in the same way as they would meet if a death occurred in the family. There were 22 of them. They sat in a big circle on the ground, and the bride sat in the center with a hen in her right hand. Ukendu sat by her, holding the ancestral staff of the family. All the other men stood outside the circle watching. Their wives watched also. It was evening, and the sun was setting. Ukendu's eldest daughter, Nijidi, asked the questions. Remember that if you do not answer truthfully, you will suffer or even die at childbirth, she began. How many men have lain with you since my brother first expressed the desire to marry you? None, she answered simply. Answer truthfully, urged the other women. None? Asked Nijidi. None, she answered. Swear on this staff of my father's, said Ukendu. I swear, said the bride. Ukendu took the hen from her, slit its throat with a sharp knife, and allowed some of the blood to fall on his ancestral staff. From that day, Amiku took the young bride to his hut, and she became his wife. The daughters of the family did not return to their homes immediately, but spent 2 or 3 days with their kinsmen. So that we see as a wedding ceremony in the Igbo tribe. So we've kind of been taken through the whole process, like setting the bride price all the way through the actual ceremony at this point in the book. On the second day, Ukendu called together his sons and daughters and his nephew, Okonkwo. The men brought their goatskin mats with which they sat on the floor, and the women sat on a sisal mat spread out on a raised bank of earth. Ukendu pulled gently at his gray beard and gnashed his teeth, and then he began to speak, quietly and deliberately, picking his words with great care. It is Okonkwo that I wish primarily to speak to, he began, but I want all of you to note what I am going to say. I am an old man, and you are all children. I know more about the world than any of you. If there is anyone among you who thinks he knows more, let him speak up. He paused, but no one spoke. He sounds like intimidating. He's like that old, scary, like probably gross looking guy. It's like, remember, he's Okonkwo's uncle, but he's like really old. Because Okonkwo is probably in like his 50s now. Why is Okonkwo with us today? This is not his clan. We are only his mother's kinsmen. He doesn't belong here. He is in exile, condemned for 7 years to live in a strange land. And so, he is bowed with grief. But there is just one question that I would like to ask him. Can you tell me, Okonkwo, why it is that one of the commonest names we give our children is Nineka, or Mother is Supreme? We all know that a man is the head of the family, and his wives do his bidding. A child belongs to its father and his family, and not to its mother and her family. A man belongs to his fatherland and not to his motherland. And yet, we say Ineka, Mother is Supreme. Why is that? There was silence. I want Okonkwo to answer me, said Ukendu. I don't know the answer, Okonkwo said. You don't know the answer. So you see that you are a child. You have many wives and many children, more children than I have. You're a great man in your clan, but you are still a child, my child. Listen to me and I shall tell you. But there's one more question that I need to ask you. Why is it that when a woman dies, she is taken home to be buried with her own kinsmen? She is not buried with her husband's kinsmen. Why is that? Your mother was brought home to me and buried with my people. Why was that? Okonkwo shook his head. He does not know that either, said Ukendu. And yet he's full of sorrow because he has come to live in his motherland for a few years. He laughed a mirthless laughter and turned to his sons and daughters. What about you? Can you answer my question? They all shook their heads. Then listen to me, he said, and cleared his throat. It's true that a father belongs to its father. It's true that a child belongs to its father. But when a father beats his child, it seeks sympathy in its mother's hut. A man belongs to his fatherland when things are good and life is sweet. But when there is sorrow and bitterness, he finds refuge in his motherland. Your mother is there to protect you. She is buried there, and that is why we say that Mother is supreme. Is it right that you, Okonkwo, should bring to your mother a heavy face and refuse to be comforted? Be careful, or you may displease the dead. Your duty is to comfort your wives and children and take them back to your fatherland after 7 years. But if you allow sorrow to weigh you down and kill you, they will all die in exile. He paused for a long while. These are now your kinsmen. He waved at his sons and daughters. You think you're the greatest sufferer in the world? Do you know that men are sometimes banished for life? Do you know that men sometimes lose all their yams and even their children? I had 6 wives once. I have none now, except that young girl who knows not her right from her left. Do you know how many children I have buried? Children I begot in my youth and strength? 22. This guy got busy a lot when he was younger. That's really sad though. Can you imagine like losing 22 children? And I don't know how many of them were twins and like, thrown away, but this poor old man, he's like that guy who's like lived a really awful hard life, and he has like no tolerance for anybody that's like feeling sorry for himself, because he feels like he just went through something like way worse, and that the person who feels sorry for themselves is just not appreciative for what they do have. That's kind of what he reminds me of. And then he says, I did not hang myself, and I am still alive. If you think that you are the greatest sufferer in the world, ask my daughter Aquani how many twins she has borne and thrown away. Have you not heard the song they sing when a woman dies? For whom is it well? For whom is it well? There is no one for whom it is well. I have no more to say to you. Okay, so that was like a super sassy, like cut the crap Okonkwo and start getting over yourself speech from his uncle. That is like really, really, I don't know. I think it's interesting that Okonkwo does not respond at the end of that chapter. We don't know if he does respond, of course, but the author does not give him a response. So that's something that you can kind of like ask yourself why that chapter ends that way. Okay, so that's chapter 14, and we will continue with chapter 15 later. Thanks.